This is the SAT data overview for Darlington School Upper School Division meeting, November 2013. The purpose of this is to analyze the data for Darlington's Upper School SAT scores. Who can benefit from this data, and what is the purpose of analyzing it? Teachers and administrators can use the data to improve teaching and learning. We can identify trends in SAT scores at Darlington School and create solutions for improvement of our SAT scores. Now, the data that we're going to analyze today is school demographic data such as our total enrollment, race and ethnicity. Since we are a boarding school, we're going to talk about day versus resident, and then tuition, full tuition versus financial aid. Then we're going to dive into the SAT scores. We're going to look at the overall scores, the averages. We're going to do some score comparisons for Rome High School and also the overall state. We're going to talk about scores by subject area with strengths and weaknesses, and we're also going to talk about scores above and below college acceptance levels. So first, let's look at our enrollment. Our total upper school enrollment, we're going to look at the years 2011, 12, and 13. So basically, we're looking at ninth grade, being between 100 and 150, and we've kept that level. 12th grade in 2011 was a little bit higher, and we're looking at the trends going up. But as we know and we've talked about in all year this year about how our current 8th grade enrollment is very low, so we're hoping with more international students in our boarding area that we can bring in more students for the 9th grade. We're still at a very low level, but we're trying to increase that. Our enrollment by race is, of course, higher for our Caucasian students. We also have a high level of Asian students, but we also know that almost all of our Asian students are boarding students, full-time residents, and most of them are full tuition. Now, other demographic data that we need to consider is our residential versus day. We still are at 60% day student versus 40%. We have been, as we've talked about throughout the year, trying to increase our boarding. We are almost at capacity now. We've, of course, added a new dorm area, and we're looking at doing even one more probably in the next year or so. We are predominantly male. We know that we do have a much higher level of male students than we do female. We hope to level that off, but being, again, a boarding student, parents are less likely to put their girls in a boarding school than they are their boys. We are still at a financial aid status of less than 40%. We do know that our tuition is what keeps us going. So we do provide some financial aid status assistance to students, but we are actually moving toward being more full pay than we are providing financial aid. Now let's just go ahead and get directly into our SAT scores. This year, our average scores in SAT in writing was, for this year, right around a little above, between 560 and 565. This is a good score, but again, as we see the trend in 2011, we were much higher, and then we dropped very low in 2012, and then we have brought it up a little bit, but as you can see, it's still not where it needs to be. In our critical reading scores, for this year are right around 538. Again, 2011, our scores were very high at about 547, and then again dropping in 2012. And this is the area that we can use some, improvement. Our critical reading scores have gone from 547 to 535, and they're back up at 539, which is really not enough. Being a private college prep institution, we know that our scores need to be higher than this, especially in our critical reading. Now our math scores are pretty good. As you can see, we're averaging about 580. This is one of our strengths. Our math department really excels. We are teaching the best courses that we can to prep our students, even starting in our ELA 8, our Early Learning Academy. We are starting them on the algebra classes that they need earlier, which is really shown to be one of our strengths. So again, showing that our average in 2011 was 592, which is excellent. And then we dropped really low in 2012, and we are slowly climbing back up again to a higher average in our math. Our overall scores, SAT score average in 2011 was 1677. In 2012, we dropped down to 1599, and then now we're back up again to 1625, which again is still really good scores over the national average, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But again, going back to the fact that we are a college prep institution, we need to be thinking about a little bit higher scores. Now let's look at the comparison that I talked about earlier. If you look at our comparison to Darlington versus Rome High School, we still are way above average in our area. But then again, you have to think about that we are a boarding school. We do bring in almost half of our students from other areas in the upper school. So it's really hard to compare our area. If you look at Darlington, like I said, we're averaging, about 677, whereas their average is right around, I think, 1558 to 60. So we are higher. So then if you look at Georgia state average versus Darlington school, the Georgia state average for 2013 was around 1445, where again we are at 1677. So we are doing very good as far as comparing to the state and the local area. Okay, so this is something that we really need to talk about, is our students that are above and below college acceptance level. Now, the average college acceptance level is around 500. Some schools are different, but most want you to be right at that 500 or above, especially, a lot of our students, we want to get scholarships for college. They need to be well above. So if we look at 2011, we were, even though our scores were very high in math, we were at 64%. Now we're at about 69% that are above. We still have that 31% that are below 500. Now in writing, we have that 36% versus our 64% that are below 500. And then our critical reading, again, is been one of our weaknesses, is at 66% above and 34% below. So we need to look at how we're gonna work on this and get this to be where it needs to be. Now, our questions to consider is, how do we continue to improve our students' SAT scores? What action plan can we develop to improve student learning and our SAT scores? And then some things that we may want to look at, and even get into even more data is, what did our curriculum look like in 2011? What did we do different from 2011 to 2012, and then 2012 to 2013 to see a decline and then a rise again? These are some questions that we need to think about, and maybe even get some more data that we can figure out what were we doing in 2011 that our scores were very high, and what can we do to add to those scores, add to those curriculums to even get our scores even higher. Okay, so this portion is just for the class. After meeting with the department chairs and talking with them about this data overview, I just wanted to add this part. This is some recommendations that were our department chairs came up with. They really love this data overview, so I'm only adding this portion for class purposes. Some of the recommendations that they gave me were to continue with the reading and writing workshop in the primary grades. After doing some research, and the department has actually felt that these reading and writing workshops were really helping in the lower grades to bring these students up. Now, I know that we are in the upper school, we have boarding students, but we still have a lot of day students that can help balance out those scores. To continue to encourage students to do well in algebra in the ELA 8, which is our Early Learning Academy through 8th grade, as well as the upper school. So those algebra scores, they want, to continue to get their skills up so that their math scores will continue to rise. They suggested some statistics classes as electives. Now, students are always struggling to find those good electives. Maybe students that are struggling in certain kinds of, math scores after taking the PSAT, then possibly offering those statistic classes as an elective. And then again, offering more English and writing electives for freshmen and sophomores. This has been something that our school has been talking about for some time. So me doing this data overview and showing it to them actually provided them with the information that they really want to move forward to offer some creative writing and some other things that would help with the SAT scores. They want to, and this has been something that our school has talked about for some time, is to provide more SAT coaching classes. We have a learning center at our school that helps students with learning disabilities. They also have talked about hiring possibly a part-time person that would not only provide coaching classes for SAT for students, but also help teachers with their curriculums and do some professional development that will help increase those scores. And then the last thing that they decided that would be good would be to create a plan for students that score low on the PSAT. Go ahead and get them started on something that can increase the scores early on from the 9th grade.